I want to deal with something very practical in this fourth area that promotes transparency, and that is refining our communication skills. Research shows that there are four vital parts to effective communication. The first is called the intent. The intent is the motive behind what we say. Now, I want to give you an illustration of what I mean by that. Let's say years ago when I would go out and leave on a weekend, and Debbie was not traveling with me. She was at home with the boys at that time. And I come back home. We hadn't seen each other for a while. And Debbie, when I come up to her, she says, "Sam, let's go take a walk, and let's look at all the flowers, and let's look at the trees. Let's just take a walk together." Now, because my personality is different, probably when I was flying back on the plane, I was thinking about all the things I had to do when I got back home. I probably made a list of things out for me to do and a list of things out maybe even for Debbie to do. She's shaking her head, yes. And so when I got home, I'm thinking about everything I've got to get done. So when she says, "Let's go outside and take a walk and look at the flowers," what's she really asking me for? Time. She wants to spend some time with me. But I may be thinking to myself, being the insensitive husband that I am, I'm not thinking about that. All I'm thinking about is, hey, I don't have time to take a walk. I got this to do, this to do, this to do, you know. And she is saying, "I want time with you." Now that brings us to the second point, the criteria. The criteria is the plan for accomplishing the intent. Debbie hid the intent. Her intent was to have time with me. But she didn't communicate that. What she did is she communicated in the criteria. Most people hide the intent and communicate in the criteria. The criteria then might have been in which she said, "Let's go outside and take a walk and look at the flowers." That's saying, this is what we'll do. What she really wanted was time alone. She hid that, thinking that I would understand that, but being the logical male brain that I am, I didn't perceive that in this illustration. So we might say, to avoid miscommunication, make sure that the intent is clear. You have to make sure that you really are giving the intent of what you're asking for to make it clear. You can't make an assumption that the other person understands that, because many times they do not. To avoid miscommunication, you got to make sure the intent is clear. Then you have the process. The process. You have the intent, the criteria. Thirdly is the process, and the process is important too. It's the manner in which you express yourself. Because researchers say that 55% of what people respond to and make assumptions about take place visually. That is, we communicate more visually than any other way. Facial expressions, hand expressions. There's a lot of communication going on through visual communication. I mean, can you remember ever maybe sitting in your favorite chair in your living room? You're sitting there minding your own business. Maybe you're reading a book or something, and your husband or wife walks up to you and looks down at you and says something like this: "What's wrong with you?" And you hadn't said a word. You're sitting there reading or doing something. What they're saying is, I can read you like a book. I know what you're thinking. And most of the time, they can. They can look at your face and they can see if something is bothering you, whether you're mad. You communicate very, very strongly visually. In fact, you've probably done this to your kids before. "Don't look at me that way. I know what you're thinking." You know, maybe you've thought that even if you didn't say that, and many times you do know, because again, visual communication is a powerful part of communication. 38% of what people respond to, make assumptions about, take place through the sound of your voice, how you say what you say. Now, let me give you an illustration of this too. This is important too. Let's say years ago, back when I was working as an engineer, I would leave in the morning, I say 6:30 in the morning, and I would go down to the job where I would be slaving away all day long for my wife and for my kids. I would be working very, very hard, and I would be at a job place working where my wife had it made. She got to stay home with the kids, amen? She didn't have to work. She didn't have a job, right? And she got to stay home with the kids. And so at 5 o'clock, when I got off from work, I would get in my car, drive home, and I'm thinking in my mind, you know, I bet my wife is going to roll out the red carpet for her king when I get home. I mean, when I drive up in the driveway, I'm probably going to be able to smell the meal outside that she's cooking for her king. And so I'm imagining this meal that's being cooked. I'm imagining this desserts that she's cooked for me. After all, I've labored hard all day long, and I've come home. Her king has arrived. I walk into the front door. I walk down through the hallway, look over in the dining room table. There's nothing on the table. I go into the kitchen, and she's got a few pots and pans just beginning to start supper. And I look over at her and I say something like this. I thought we was going to have supper at 6 o'clock. Now, how is she probably going to respond to that? A lot of that depends on how I say it. Now, if I say, I thought we was going to have supper at 6 o'clock like that, she probably would say maybe something like this. Here's the pots and pans, help yourself. Or McDonald's is right down the road. Go in and get you a burger if you'd like to, you know. But this brings us to the process or the way we talk to each other in the tone of our voice. Now, there's three different parts of this. The tone is the harshness of pitch of what you say. If I were to say, I thought we was going to have supper at 5 o'clock, that's pretty harsh. I wouldn't get by with that. Whereas if I said, I thought we was going to have supper at 5 o'clock, said it a lot softer, I might get by with that. Debbie said, no, I wouldn't get by with that either. The tempo is the speed of what you say. I thought we was going to have supper at 5 o'clock. I thought I could say it real fast. Or I could say it real slow. I thought we was going to have supper at 5 o'clock. Again, the speed of what I say makes a difference too. And then the volume and how loud I say it. I could scream and I thought I was going to have supper at 5 o'clock. I definitely wouldn't get by with that. Or I could say it, again, very low. I thought I was going to have supper at 5 o'clock. I might get by with that. The point I'm trying to make is, you know, the tone, the tempo, and volume of what you say, how you say it is very, very important. And we need to think about these things, okay? And then the content is the actual, fourthly, the content is the actual words that we say, what actually comes out of our mouth. Now, it's very interesting that researchers say only 7% of what people respond to and make assumptions about take place through the actual words that we say. Only 7%.
Now, I find, to me, these are profound percentages. Really, 7% is what we communicate with the words alone? And even though I've heard these percentages, I know them, but sometimes I tend to live in denial of them because I know there are times when if I really want to convey a message to Sam, I might be a little sharp, or maybe a lot sharp. And Sam might look at me like he's questioning my attitude or something. And what I do in response to him is I change the look on my face. And I change the tone of my voice, and then I'll innocently reply, all I said was, and then I'll repeat word for word what I just said, but with a different tone. I tell you, tone makes so much difference how someone reacts to you. And they can tell what's going on in your heart by the harshness in your voice. It is so important. And I think of one time when we were having, we would have a college and career Bible study at our home every Wednesday night. So a lot of young people there, and there was in particular one young couple, and they had a lot of conflict in their marriage. And this particular night, the husband was not able to be there, so the wife was there. And Sam was going through the study of Hannah and Elkanah, you know, where Hannah couldn't have children. And Hannah was really upset and she was crying. And Sam was reading through the passage and he got to the point where Elkanah was trying to console her. And he read this verse and it went something like, you know, why are you crying? Can't you see I love you better than 10 sons? He was trying to console her. And Sam's voice conveyed that. It was precious and it was really sweet. And this young girl pipes up, this young wife, she goes, oh, well, I didn't read it that way. And so she read exactly the same words and she goes, why are you crying? Can't you see I love you better than 10 sons? And see, she was coming from conflict and she was used to a harsh tone and a lot of criticism. And you see, it makes, same words, but it makes such a difference in the way that we convey them. And we tend to communicate a whole lot more, I know I do, through body language and the sound of our voice than we do the actual words that we say. And communication, hey, it's a reflection of what's in our heart. And our heart controls our body language. And it controls our voices and it controls our words. And that's why James 1:19 says, let every man be swift to hear, but slow to speak and slow to wrath. And what this tells me is I need to check my heart before I communicate. Motives matter, and they really do show up in your heart and in your body language.
You know, and again, we could spend a lot more time on this, but it is, you have to continually remind yourself, if you say something, and after you say it, you say, you know, why did I say it that way? Why did I say what I said? Why did I say it with the tone that I said it? And you begin to think on that. What it is, you need to remember that your mouth is an echo chamber of your heart. It comes from your heart. So it's a time to check up on your heart and see what your heart is. Again, going back to last night, all we've talked about, what am I focused on? What is the focus in my life? Is my focus on Christ? Is my focus on myself? Is my focus on getting this done or that done? Or is my focus on pleasing God with the words that come out of my mouth, that they would, again, enhance the glory of my spouse? They would be the words of King Jesus that would come out of our mouths and reflect Him, or are they words that are very hurtful words that are coming out of our mouth? So this is so important, even these practical communication skills that kind of get little red flags to us of where we are in our relationship with our heart and God.